All right, so we're going to get started. So welcome to our fourth virtual boot camp. I'm Julie Fielding. I'm the Assistant Director of the Michigan Athletics Career Center, joined by my team members, Cody Riffle, our Employer Relations Coordinator, Joe Marula, our Operations and Logistics Assistant, and then Maurice Washington, who oversees and is our Director of the Michigan Athletics Career Center. So today's topic, we are going to be discussing the art of interviewing and how as a student athlete you can prep best for job, internship, and grad school interviews. We're joined by two very special guests today. We have Giselle Mitchell. She is the Manager of Diversity and Inclusion at the NFL. She's a Michigander. She's up in Flint right now. And then we're joined by Emma Lenowitz. She is a member and current student athlete on our women's rowing team and a former intern of the New York Mets. So thanks, Emma and Giselle, for joining us. We're excited to have you on this call.
Awesome. Thank you for having me.
Yes, we're excited too for your feedback and your insight as into interviewing. I know a lot of us are looking forward to what you both have to say. Now I'm going to kick it over to Maurice, our director, who's going to go right into the first part of it.
Well, thanks, Julie, and again, welcome everybody for joining us today. Snowy day in Michigan, right? We'll get through this. I think it's important to start up with the types of interviews, right? Because, we're in a changing landscape, and we know interviewing is something that we all really don't look forward to, right? It could create some stress, but if we are properly prepared for the interview, I think all of us would do well. The first type of interview that I want to really focus on is the virtual interview, or with the telephone or Skype. I think the landscape that we are in now, with we're working from home. Many of our students and staff, those who are looking for other opportunities will do a virtual interview. It could be challenging, right? I think this is a great exercise in what we're doing, but it can be challenging because we are more interpersonal. We like to talk to people. One of the challenging things about virtual, you don't really get to see those nonverbals as much, the body cues, but know that is a type. In person provides an initial impression of attitude, interest, and skills. I mean, it's great to sit across from someone. Hopefully we'll get back to that point where we can sit across from someone or a group of people and have a conversation about, what we bring to the organization. There's definitely value in an interpersonal, in-person interview. Again, those nonverbals are huge, and body language is huge. The most common type of interview, which combines the experiences, personality, behavior, is behavioral. And I think for most fields, it's that space, right? And so it's not always how you respond to a question, but it's not always what you say in responding, but it's how confident you are in that behavioral, right? Sometimes it's more subjective, right? It's your experiences that you're expressing. But if you are interviewing and you're asked a question and your response is, your facial expressions, or if that I'm making it up, or I don't know, or I'm looking around trying to find an answer, those are things that can be easily picked up. And the fourth type, and there are several other types, but is group and or panel. Most oftentimes that behavioral is you may have a group or panel that's interviewing you. And I think it's important that when you're responding to questions, that you are focusing on everybody on that panel. Even if the individual if the person who's leading the interview session is asking a question, I think it's important that you pan and pay attention to everyone there. So those are really the four big types that, we're going to really talk about today, but, virtual will be here and something we need to get used to. One thing about Skype, we often, as we're sitting here, we're sitting in our comfortable clothes and we're kind of relaxed, and we normally Skype our family and friends. But I would encourage our student athletes, those who are listening, that if you ever have to do a virtual interview, that you dress the part, right? Because you look good, you feel good, and that's the attitude that you will have. So I would encourage you to dress the part. And you come into that virtual space as if you were meeting someone in person, right? Because you'll leave a lasting impression. Now, the interview process consists of 4 phases, right? The preparation phase, and Cody will kind of talk about that, the planning phase, the conducting phase, which is the actual interviews, and an evaluation. And I think that if you look at an interview process and you break it down into smaller pieces, and you prepare for each of these different areas. They're very, very important. If you only thought about what I'm going to say and do during the interview and you don't do any prep, then it's going to be problems, right? And if you don't evaluate, after the process is over, do some reflection on what you just experienced, then it may be some problems, right? We talk about feedback and follow-up. So, my team is going to move into, what's important. Julie, take us from there.
Yeah, so one of the most important parts of the interview is the preparation. So imagine yourself competing in your sport at the level you're competing at without training, without practicing. And that's what it would be like to go into an interview without preparing. So one of the first things is understanding and knowing yourself. What are your values? What are you looking for out of this experience, whether that be an internship, a job, or a grad school application? So knowing what you're looking for, so you're able to articulate those skills moving forward and apply it to what you're actually applying for. Know the employer, do that research. We have resources now like LinkedIn where you can learn everything about, this mission statement of the company, a link to their website, the profile of all of their employees, what industry they're in, how many people are employed there, what's going on in recent news with that company. So making sure you are spending a good amount of time on that employer and knowing who they are and how you can add value to the interview and knowing that. And then knowing the industry or field. When we are conducting interviews with student athletes, one of the big things we'll ask is, tell us something about a recent industry trend that you know. And that's something that always tends to hang them up. So be sure that you're not only investing your time and energy in learning about that company in particular, but knowing the industry and the field that company belongs in and what's going on. If you're not doing that research, it can come off as maybe you're not interested in that opportunity or in that industry, or you're not as passionate about it. So making sure you're taking that time to conduct that research, take notes, and be prepared will be a differentiator going forward. And then know what you're applying for. Something that can be really difficult is, if you're applying to multiple internships, multiple jobs and things like that, you want to be sure you're keeping those requirements straight and you're able to articulate not only your skills and what you'd bring to the table, but how it relates to that position. When you're interviewing, they don't necessarily care about everything you've ever done or every skill that you possess. They care about the skills you possess and the experience that you have and how it'll be of benefit to that company and to that position. And so with that, I want to kick it to Michelle on this. And can you talk a little bit about your experience in interviewing and, what you think is a good amount of time going into that student athletes should put into the preparation phase? Can employers tell when they don't prepare, and just some feedback on that?
Yeah, definitely can piggyback on a couple of those things. It's very important to know, like you guys said, the role that you're interviewing for, because again, we understand it's not the last stop for some of the student athletes, but at least we know if you have reviewed the position, the criteria that we may be looking for, and that you've kind of researched, and then too, you can relate your current experience or your future desires of how that helps you prepare for your career. So it's not necessarily that you have to check each individual box that's listed, but present it to us of how this experience can help you check that box, so to speak, for your career. So again, thoroughly knowing the expectations and then having a place for yourself to what you want to learn from it, should you be the candidate of choice. So always think as far as the experience that you've had, but also how you can bring value to that position and be beneficial and bring value to the company while you're in that space.
Awesome. Definitely good points. Good feedback. Mm-hmm. And Emma, can you touch on your experience and how, giving some tips and advice on how you've prepared for interviews you've had, specifically your interview with the Mets and how you prepared for that opportunity?
Yeah, I think with interviews, I've definitely been on both sides. I've definitely gone into some where I haven't been as prepared as I should be, and it's gotten me kind of caught up and I'm asked a question and then I have trouble answering it. But I'd say how I've prepared, especially for the Mets when I had interviewed with them, one of the questions was like, why do you want to work for the Mets? And I think for me, it was very based off of the people that I had met that currently like were part of the organization. And that was like a big thing for me. So I had, met some Mets employees like on campus here and like stayed in touch with them. And that, because I knew them, was definitely like one of the first reasons why I knew I wanted to apply to that team and that organization, because I had like such a great bond with them. And I know that like a place that I'm going to be successful working is where like there's good people. And I think that was like a good thing for me to talk about when I was interviewing, because when they said, like, why Mets, or like, what about it, do you know about the Mets? And I could like look to like two specific people in my mind, like one of whom works for the Mets that was also a Michigan rower. And I think that just having experience, like talking with people that work at the company, or even just like taking the advice that I've gotten from Julie a bunch of times about reaching out to people on LinkedIn that might work at the company that you're potentially looking to hopefully work for someday, is super helpful as well. Because like, what's the harm in trying and asking if 15 minutes of your time on the phone or an email chain or something like that. That definitely has always helped me. I think instead of just going into a interview blindly, is definitely like getting to know people that work there.
Perfect. Thank you. Now we're going to kick it to Joe to talk about the planning part of the process.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Julie. So yeah, jumping into the planning phase, really this is just doing your homework. A lot of the points that Julie just mentioned in the preparation phase, we're now kind of, bringing them to life and putting action to those, to that planning. So you want to start with, for me, I love to just grab the job description, right, and copy and paste those bullet points onto a Google Doc is what I use. And I take in a different font color, I'll start to take apart those bullet points and identify areas and strengths or experience that I have in my current role, or experiences that you've had as a student athlete or within your 4 years of undergrad that relate to what they're looking for in those roles. So picking apart that job description and kind of just really understanding, the qualifications, the requirements, what they're looking for in a candidate is very important. Going into research the employer, Julie mentioned, understanding the industry, and really what that means is understanding how not only the industry that they're in and being, up to date and familiar with the current topics within that industry, but understanding how they fit in, how the company you're applying for fits in with that, what's their mission within the industry. Be familiar with that type of information. Social media, super important, in my opinion, to jump on their social channels, Twitter, Instagram, and see what they're posting. Find out what the company's excited about. Chances are, what the good stuff, for lack of better terms, that they have going on is going to make it to their social channels. So jump on and kind of figure out, and this will help you when you go to develop some comprehensive questions, follow-up questions for after the interview. Looking at their social media channels will help you with that. And follow those pages. Go through your Twitter, Instagram, and make sure that you have a professional presence. Student athletes are typically well trained and professional presence on social media. But I did hear from an employer something pretty interesting. They're not really so much when they're going to look at your pages, which they do. They're not so much interested in what you're tweeting. They know you're smart enough not to tweet or post anything out of line. They're really looking at what you're liking and retweeting. Those are seen as endorsements by you. So they're looking to get learn a little bit about you through that. So make sure that you have a clear social media page and follow their accounts. So whoever is running that account knows that you're doing your homework, you're being proactive. Check in on the organization's, the structure and culture of the organization. Not only do you want to research the people that you're interviewing with and be well versed with them, you want to know a little bit more about the people in the senior leadership roles that you might not be interviewing with, but those individuals that have a great deal of responsibility within that company. Find out just a brief synopsis about what their essential role is and responsibility. And then the last one is professional development. Understand that, with an entry-level role and many of the positions that you as undergrad students are applying for, that first job is really preparing you for the next job and setting the tone for the rest of your career. So you want to make sure that the company that you're applying for a position with provides extensive professional development opportunities for you to continue to grow your network, continue to grow your skills. And social media comes into play with that too. Jump on social media and see if the people in these roles or the people within the department are actively taking part in professional development opportunities. Julie, I think I'm kicking it back to you.
You are. We like to say, fail to plan, plan to fail. And so you want to be sure that you have everything and all your ducks in a row. If you're not prepared for the interview, the employer is going to see, is this intern, is this employee going to be prepared for the job? Are they going to do what I, ask them to do? So making sure you're echoing those sentiments as well. Heading into the conducting phase, and some of these might seem super simplistic, but we just want to reiterate the importance. The interview is their first impression of you in person. They've gotten your resume, they have seen your qualifications on this sheet of paper, and now you're in front of them. And so, whether you're greeted by their secretary or somebody in the front office, making sure that that first impression starts when you walk in that door. So being conscious of that. Maurice talked about that dress for success piece. When you're feel good, you're going to perform well, right? So making sure you're in an outfit that you're very comfortable in and confident in, so you exude that through your responses to the questions. If you're on time, you're late. So making sure that you arrive early, 10 to 15 minutes early. Imagine arriving on time or a little bit late to practice or to the competition. Your coach is not going to have that, right? So just again, have that same mentality when you go into that interview, making sure you're arriving on time, which in turn means early. Firm handshake, again, so this is, well, moving forward, who knows if this will be part of the process, right? But a handshake or some kind of greeting, making sure you're addressing that person who's going to be spending time to interview you. This is really establishing and cementing your expertise in what you can bring to the table as an intern or as an employee. So making sure that you have that nonverbal communication down, which comes from that eye contact, and you're conscious of your body language. If you had expressed before how excited you are for this opportunity and you're super passionate, and you go into that interview or that first kind of introduction with that interviewer, and maybe you're not directly looking at them, or the inflection in your voice doesn't indicate that you're excited, regardless of what you're saying, they'll look at that and say, is that person really excited? Does that person really want to be here? So making sure you're checking off all these boxes and keeping these in mind as you move forward. Giselle, can you talk to us quickly about just first impressions and how important that is in the process? Is this something that could determine one candidate versus another during that first interaction?
Definitely. First impressions are very important. Again, like you said, we already kind of know you on paper. At the same time, we want to know who you are in person, or, again, through Skype or video. So bring your personality, be yourself, be authentic. You don't necessarily have to be the robot, again, come true to yourself. So again, bring some personality, smile, make the panel smile, again, and just kind of break the monotony of just serious, straight, yes, no, maybe, no, happy to be here. But again, just be yourself. So first impressions are very important. Stay authentic, remain calm, speak slowly, be confident, and show us who you are. And, what's meant to be will be is always my thought process. But come in, I say guns blazing, but that means just come and show us who you are.
Perfect. Thank you.
Giselle, would you?
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Before we go there, I would think, I'm gonna get your opinion on this. I think the interview will start with the first person you interact with at the location.
Oh yeah.
You have to know where the interview starts and when it ends. It doesn't start with the first question. It starts with the first handshake or the first good morning.
Correct.
So I think, yeah, good point.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
People are always paying attention, even when you think they're not.
Exactly. Who are you when no one's looking?
Exactly. Absolutely. All right, I'm going to kick it, I think, off to Cody for this next part.
Yeah, thanks, Julie. As she had mentioned earlier, I manage our employer relations, and one of the things that I'm constantly asking our employers, what makes someone special in an interview? What makes someone that's a normal candidate versus someone that excels? And actually, kind of to your point, one of the unique responses I had from one of our partners, they had mentioned specifically that, how did you treat the receptionist when you came in? After you left, I went and talked to the receptionist. How was this person in the lobby when I had him wait 5 minutes after the time he was supposed to come in? What were those things? What were the things he was asking? Were they at ease? So sometimes it's not even what you're saying, it's how you're acting. What kind of energy and persona are you putting off when you don't think you're being tested? So that's really what the conducting phase is. This is the meat and potatoes of the interview, the opportunity to showcase your preparation, unique skill set, and demonstrate your candidacy for the opportunity and organization. Some of the things that we talked about, but being able to communicate your skills, being prepared, sharing the knowledge of your organization, that's really important. I want to give a quick shout out to Joe, who you heard from earlier. I always reference him because he did an exceptional job when interviewing for this opportunity he's at now, doing the research on the company, seeing who the leadership was, knowing a bit about their background. What were some of the initiatives that we were doing? It was pretty amazing. And that's something that I tell student athletes now as we're talking about interviews. Those are things that you're going to remember. Those are things that employers are going to remember, that you went above and beyond in those instances, and ultimately may be the deciding factor between you and another candidate. So discovering specific information. It's all right not to know the answer. A common thing that I'm hearing from employers too is that a lot of times candidates will talk and ramble. One, that they're nervous, but two, they don't like the idea of having some empty space. So sometimes silence is actually a good thing, where you can actually think and gather your thoughts and make a meaningful response. But that was the part that I want to get into is when you're asked a question, there's a certain framework that you can follow. And actually, Julie, if you want to go to the next part here, there's a framework that you're probably familiar with, and you may even answer and take questions on with this framework without even realizing it. But it's called the SOAR method, which is identifying the situation. When you're answering a question, you're proposing the situation, talking about the objective in which you were trying to accomplish, the actions that you use, and the results that came from it. So this is a good way to remember when you're asked a certain question by an employer that you may not have a ready response to, or something that you may not have trained or rehearsed on. And I have a couple examples. One that just from a few questions that are pretty common, but ways that you can implement your experience as a student athlete, or if you've had previous career experience as well. So a common question would be, tell me about a time where you had an issue with a coworker or teammate and how you resolved it. So I kind of put myself in the shoes of a past life as a track and field member, but saying as a member of the track and field team, I had 70 teammates, which often brought about conflict. That's proposing the situation. As a senior member of the team, I was tasked by the coaching staff to help resolve conflict among the rest of the team. So that was the objective. In one instance, I had to help resolve a conflict between two teammates who were arguing about the team's commitment to enacting a dry season. As a senior member, I came and reminded them that it was a group decision and something agreed upon by the team. So that was the action that I utilized. And with the result, rather than taking to the coaches, we resolved the issue, which led to them trusting me with more situations later in the year. So that's just kind of a way that you might naturally answer a question, but when you're flustered and not really sure which approach to take, that's something you can take a step back for a moment, formulate your response, and go from there. But I wanted to ask Emma, I know that you've done a few different interviews and held your internship with the Mets last year, but when you're proposed with a question like that, how do you draw on your athletic experience in order to be relatable to what they're asking you?
Yeah, thanks, Cody. I think for me, I always draw to my athletic experience in one way or another. It definitely, I'd say it's come up in every interview that I've ever done. And I think especially, like the question, I guess, of how do you resolve a conflict with a teammate, I've kind of answered before and talked about a time, similar to your example, like being on the rowing team. There's, upwards of 60 of us, and there's, the novice team and the varsity team. And it's definitely, I've answered that question before, but another question that I've also been able to like bring my athletic experience into the mix is when they say like, what is your greatest accomplishment so far? And for me, that always brings me back to, winning a Big Ten championship with my team last year, because, in the sport of rowing, or for our team in particular, we had gone 6 years without winning and gone 6 years of being second to Ohio State. And I think that definitely resonates with a lot of Michigan fans and Michigan people, and just, kind of explaining the process of how our team changed from, 2018 to 2019, how I helped, bring positive change within the team, and then like how that resulted in winning races, getting to Big Tens, winning as a team, like winning all together, then going forward to NCAAs and like placing high there as well. And I always like bring up my rowing experience and athletic background like as much as I can, and talk about my teammates, because I think it definitely helps me in any interview that I've been in.
I know. Why isn't it working?
No, that's awesome. And I think one thing too, and I know Maurice and Julie could speak to this, one of the things that we often hear from student athletes, especially if they may have only had a couple of different career experiences, is how do I balance, talking about my athletic experience while also talking about other opportunities I've had, because they don't want to talk too much about being just an athlete and want to propose that they have other things as well. And that can be difficult, but there are ways to do it. Maurice or Julie, you want to share a little bit about how we've kind of approached that situation with students?
Well, one thing I tell students is, you're a student and athlete, right? Athletics is what you do. It's not always who you are, you know what I mean? And you bring more, great value. Sure, there are attributes that you gain from being a student athlete, things you've done all your life. But think about the company, as Joe was talking about doing research. Think about the company and think about what you bring to the organization, right? Because once you're there, you got to produce, right? And the interview gets you, the first interview gets you the second interview. And so you have to show at each stage of this process your value, right? And again, being a student athlete is an advantage. It's a huge advantage. But what else? Right, and our student athletes don't always think about the what else. My identity in that, and I think it's so important, because the young people in this space, they bring so much, right? And if you're able to articulate those things, we always, when you meet people, it's a couple seconds from the first time you meet them, if you want to talk to them again, right? And that's that first question. Tell me a little bit about yourself. If it's all about sports, you gotta think the person you're talking to probably doesn't have a clue, right? But if you know what the company does, and you know what you bring, and you bridge that gap, then that starts the momentum in this conversation, because they see you outside of being an athlete, right? They see you being a value, could be a potential value partner or candidate for this organization.
Yeah, and as a student athlete, you're typically involved in the community, whether it's individually or within the team environment. So draw from some community engagement experiences. As a student, you might be involved in some group projects, so talk about those experiences as well. You want to be sure that you're providing, dynamic experiences and not leaning too much on that student athlete experience during your responses. So make sure you have that fine balance. But one thing we know as a student athlete, you don't always have the most time to do internships or get involved in that way, but make sure you're tapping into all of your other life experiences and leveraging those in your responses. Jashelle, do you want to touch on, during the interview process, when you're, asking questions, what are things that you look for in responses, or how can, as a student athlete, how can they leverage or utilize their experience to showcase their expertise or their skill set, in your opinion?
Great question. Thank you, Julie. One thing for us here at the NFL, it's about teamwork. It's about collaboration. Again, as there's individual sports, but there's also team sports. But how can you come in and bring value to what we are trying to accomplish as a team? So again, being a collaborative partner, bringing ideas at the same time. Just because your level that we're hiring you for, or your internship, doesn't mean that your ideas aren't important. Doesn't mean that you can't speak up for your level of where you are with us, because no question is a dumb question. No idea is a bad idea. Bring it to the table, and it may be something that we haven't even thought about. So always come prepared to contribute to the team, just as you do your athletic team. Come to the internship or the job with ideas. Some may go through, some may not, some may get shot down, some may not. At the same time, at least you tried. So same thing, as D Wade say, fall down 7, get up 8, or fall down 6, get up 7, whatever the number is. But come in with contribution. Come in just with asking questions. We rather you ask questions and find the answer, rather than not know and assume and have to redo it. So just continue to come in with the mindset of, I'm here to learn. I'm going to make mistakes, but at the same time, I'm going to learn from it and continue to be a great contributor.
Any advice if there's a big hang up in answering a question? What would you say? How can somebody recover from that, or some techniques that they could utilize in those moments?
Well, for me, I would definitely say, breathe, speak slowly, be confident. At the same time, repeat, hey, would you mind repeating that question? Can you give me the second part of that question again? And then don't be afraid to write things down, because again, there's so much going on. Your adrenaline is pumping, you're excited, you want the job, you just met whoever, the AD is there, Bill Gates is in there for the Microsoft 100 million, so it's a lot of things going on. So again, don't be afraid to say, hey, let me collect myself, let me be present, let me be sure I'm understanding the question so I can give the best response to what's going on. So just be yourself, be authentic, and like I said, what's meant to be, it'll be.
Perfect. Thank you.
I love that response, because sometimes questions are 2-part, and we're so nervous we answer the first part and then we move on. We want to just get through it.
What was that second part of that question?
Right. And so that's why I encourage, when I'm talking about interviewing, to repeat the question for a couple of reasons. One reason is you allow the interviewee or to know what you asked. They understood what you're saying, right? Because we can go down a rabbit hole, start answering a question, and at the end they're like, "That's not what I asked." And now you're really out there. And another reason is, again, repeating the question so you understand. Another reason, it gives you time to think about it. As Cody said, silence, is golden. Take that moment, reflect. It's a conversation.
Yes.
It's really a conversation. And so, good point there.
Yeah, one of the best pieces of advice anyone ever gave me on interviews may have been Marisa, actually, back in the day. But he said, an interview is a two-way street. You're interviewing them just as they're interviewing you, and you're going to have your chance to ask questions, which is where we're at now. And actually, Giselle talked about some of the major pieces of that. But asking to repeat any questions you weren't sure of. You want to make sure that the responses you gave were accurate in terms of what they were asking. You don't want to be misperceived. Asking just 4 or 5 questions. It depends. Sometimes questions can go a long time. I know I've been in interviews and I've been on the other side of interviews where people have talked for quite a while. So being concise, that kind of goes along with your preparedness, but definitely making sure to ask the next steps as well. Sometimes they'll say, you'll hear back from us in a couple weeks, but having a more structured outline, and that can go with some of your questions. What does your follow-up process look like following an interview? Your feedback process, things like that. Some of the questions, and actually I want to ask Giselle this here in a minute as well. Some of the questions, this is another thing that student athletes will ask me quite a bit. What do you ask employers when they ask you, do you have questions for us? And there's really no wrong answer for that, but I think what you're asking is showing really what you're invested in terms of what you want to know about the company. So some of the things that are pretty important to ask. How will my success be measured? What can I do to exceed your expectations? They know that you're an elite athlete. They know something that you're in a unique population. They want to know that you know that. They want to know that you know how to apply it to other things. And this is a great example to showcase that's how my mind works. Does your organization have a commitment to DE&I practices? that's something that I've asked an employer that they were totally befuddled. I could tell they've never been asked that before.
Yes.
And I was like, it's important because that's a major part of Michigan, the University of Michigan. And we want to make sure that the employers we're working with are also contributing to that.
Mm-hmm.
So, Giselle, if there's certain questions that you've had on interviews or in speaking with people in this type of capacity, what are some of the questions people have asked that kind of showed you that this person, might be a good candidate, but two, is doing their due diligence?
Thank you for that, Cody. Some of the questions that, we come across, especially in my space in football ops in the DE&I area, we have a lot of externships, experientships, our JRP, Junior Rotational Program. So some of the students, some of their questions are, if I do obtain this job or opportunity, what is the likelihood of me getting hired? Or while I'm here, what is the capability of me working with different areas? If I'm an intern for football operations, do you guys mind me, being crossbred or hybrid with sponsorship, with events, with youth football? So again, asking those questions to say, hey, I may not necessarily fully know the area that I want to be in, but while I'm here, I'm very interested in these, top 3 things. And do you mind me kind of learning once my current obligation is completed? Do you mind me kind of networking and communicating with different departments to learn a little bit more while I have that access? So just being open-minded about it, and being upfront, being authentic is very helpful, because again, you may come in on a football ops internship, but you may want to go into sponsorship, but you've met the decision makers and some people in that space. So you already kind of have built that relationship, and with knowing who those particular people are and doing a great job where you are helps you say, hey, okay, well, I interned for football ops. I did a good job. I can get a great recommendation from the football ops team to go into sponsorship or events. So be great where you are, at the same time still be open about how we can assist you of where you're trying to go. So definitely continue to ask questions. How can I, like you said, be evaluated? How can I learn from different areas as well outside of my job description, but do well with that job description and kind of get the stamp of approval for other areas?
Yeah, that's important. It's I think a lot of people get intimidated by the interview process, but taking some of these ideas will make it a little less intimidating.
Yeah.
So after the interview is done, now's the time to reflect on kind of how the experience went. So I wanted to have Julie come back in here and talk about some of those important things that we reflect upon.
Thanks, Cody. So after the interview, it's not, if you get the job, it's not a done deal, or, you want to be sure, and we talked about it, it's a two-way street. You want to understand and ask yourself these questions. Am I a good fit? Being recruited to play a sport, you're going on recruiting visits and seeing if that university or college was a good fit for yourself, if that team had a culture that was a great fit for yourself. So kind of utilize that same mindset and mentality when you're going into a job or internship. You're going to be spending a good amount of time there. So you want to be sure that that's something that aligns with your values, personally and professionally, and you can see yourself enjoying it, and you have that job satisfaction. That's not something that's always talked about, but you want to find something that you're passionate about and that gives you joy, and not only that experience, but something that you like doing. We talk a lot about how much your sport fills your cup. And when your sport is over, the life after sports piece, our goal in the Michigan Athletics Career Centers is to refill that cup with something that gives you just as much satisfaction as your sport did. And so that's why these questions are so important to ponder when you're looking at jobs and internships, especially if you have multiple offers.
Mm-hmm.
You want to be sure that you're making that right decision for yourself. Is this job right for me? How, did I mesh well with the people who interviewed me? What was that culture like? What was the work environment, the space? Is this something that I can see myself doing? Is this a company I can see myself growing with? So definitely take that time to reflect on your interview experience. Obviously, when you see a job description or an internship description, that's just on paper, that's some bullet points, but going through that interview process, you're able to connect with people that work there. And so those people will tell a lot about the story, a lot about the company, and you'll be able to get that gut feeling if that's something that's right for you. And Emma, I want to ask you, when you're contemplating an offer, going through this process, what are some things you think about, or what helps you make that decision or walk through this process when you're evaluating?
I think first off, like, I guess like once I finished an interview, one of like my mentors at the Mets, like she really stresses the importance of like sending that thank you note, that follow up, whether it be by email. Well, like definitely by email, but like if you also want to send a written thank you, like I think those are always appreciated as well. I pretty much just stick to like email thank yous, but she really stressed that to all of us as Mets interns and said, don't just write like a standard one, like try to like connect a talking point that you discussed in the interview, or maybe something that like relates the two of you, like from a fellow Michigan grad or something like that. So that was like one really thing they like hammered home with us at the Mets when interviewing, and also when like networking with other people within the organization. Like as Giselle had talked about, I was in community outreach last summer, but I definitely met with some people that were in the corporate partnerships department, and like when you meet with them for lunch for 15 minutes, like send the thank you that says thanks for your time and stuff like that. And I think like for me, when like choosing an opportunity, I definitely like look to just the relationships that I have with the people that I've met, and like if I like bonded well over a phone call or over a Skype call, I think like that's so important. Just if you can see yourself sitting down with these people and collaborating and being able to work with them, and then I think it's going to be a great thing. And also, I guess like not being afraid to take a risk. I think I was definitely nervous to take the job in New York last summer. I was just finished my sophomore year, and I'm from Boston, and I would be like living on my own in New York, but I ended up, and I remember talking to Julie and saying like, what should I do? Because I wasn't sure if I should take it. And I think it's okay. It was like a definite little bit of a risk for me, and it was such a great decision. And, living with other fellow interns and, meeting new friends that I've stayed really close with and stuff like that. It was just like an overall really great opportunity to have. Yeah.
Perfect. And that's a great segue into our next part, is that after the interview process, and as Cody said, this is Joe's specialty area. So he's going to touch on this part.
Thanks, Julie, for the hype with that. But yeah, no, I'm glad I'm able to speak on this point. I'll be somewhat brief, but just want to make sure that that you understand that the follow up is really like the fourth quarter for the interview process. It's the interview extended. Okay, so you want to make sure that within 48 hours, I like to do by the end of the next business day, send them a detailed thank you note outlining your appreciation for the opportunity to interview. Make sure you put in something that you learned, or something that you enjoyed about the conversation. And if you did really well, and you felt that you absolutely killed your interview, this follow up can be a little bit more brief than the example that we have here. If you really feel like you hit all the points and really didn't miss a beat on that interview, it's just a way of really just showing what it is. It's a thank you. So make sure you get that email out afterwards. This aspect is, something that I think goes to get swept under the rug, to be quite honest, is the handwritten note. Every single interview that I've been on, and no matter if it was one person or 6 people, each one of those individuals received a handwritten note from me within a week of the interview. This, it goes a long way. People like getting these. I save every note that someone sends to me in a desk in my drawer, just because it's a cool thing to have. It's something that's kind of fallen off the earth, but starting to bring it back a little bit, because it really is so important. And people are getting their office mail during this time too. It's being forwarded to their area, so they will see it. And I also wanted to touch on briefly that in the event that you don't get the position, let's say you reach out after the time frame that they gave you, and they hit you back with an email saying, we went with a different candidate, we filled it internally, we're suspending the search, we're actually not filling this role at this time. make sure instead of, slamming the laptop shut and going outside to, just ponder, send them back an email, with gratitude, thanking them for the opportunity, talking about how much of a pleasure it was to get to know them and learn about the company, because this is a new contact for you. And just because this opportunity didn't work out, who's to say that this individual, the professional that you interviewed with, isn't at another company a year from now, and they have a role that, after a year of experience, you've gotten within another role that's perfect for you, and they've got you in mind because they remembered your correspondence. They remembered how you handled that, denial, if you will. So make sure that, if you don't end up with the role, that you do, show a sense of gratitude through correspondence follow-up.
Great.
Does anyone have anything to add to that?
I want to throw it to Giselle, you can add, but then I want to ask you just as well, any follow-up, or what's the best thank you note maybe that you've received that you remember, or something that left a lasting impression on you? I just want to ask that, and then obviously I want your thoughts at this part of the process too.
No problem. Definitely, Joseph, great things that you mentioned. That's definitely, the route to take. But again, distinction. What makes me remember you? If I'm interviewing 5, 10, 15, some places 30 people, if we have, at the NFL, if we have one job and it goes out through HR, we're getting 4,000, 5,000 applicants. So at the same time, what's making you distinctive? So I definitely say when you have those personal moments or those close relationships with some of the people that you're hiring, that you're looking to hire with, be distinctive. One of the things that me personally that I've received, a young lady, we met at our Women's Careers in Football Forum at the Combine. Very, very nice young lady, came up, introduced herself, hi, gave us her name, her institution, again, and throughout, she would just randomly come up, I'm really enjoying this, this event, appreciate it. After the event, she sent a handwritten thank you note, and then she also sent us a paperweight from her institution. So it was kind of like, okay, I remember her at the event, I remember her follow-up note, and then I remember this token of appreciation that she sent with her thank you note. So it was kind of like, okay, yeah, that's the young lady from X institution. So again, at the same time, it's kind of like when I'm looking for someone, okay, I remember the young lady from the X institution. So again, not saying that you have to go out and spend money and get graphics made and, do, order paperweights, but at the same time, it makes me remember her.
Good point. So before we open it up to any questions, and you can feel free to use the chat box for any questions. Just, Michelle, I wanted to see if you could give our student athletes on this call any advice or just words of wisdom right now as they might have been experiencing offers rescinded, offers getting shortened or going remote, smaller number of openings out there right now, so some of your words of wisdom, like I said, or advice as they move forward this process and look to capitalize on, for student athletes, summers are big for experience, right? They have, quote unquote, a little bit more time. And so going through this experience and trying to gain additional career experience during this time, it has obviously had and seen its challenges. So any advice that you have for them as they navigate, gaining some experience during the summer as an intern or work?
Oh, yes, no doubt about it. First and foremost, become comfortable with being uncomfortable. You're not the only one trying to be the only one, okay? You're a University of Michigan student athlete or Winston-Salem State and all the other institutions that may be on, but again, you're not the only one trying to be the only one. So that's where that distinction comes in. And like I said, become comfortable with being uncomfortable. Not everything is going to be a yes, but at the same time, how do you handle that? How do you pivot? How do you prepare your next step? I would definitely say, don't wait till your junior or senior year to start doing internships or reaching out or building relationships, because when you walk across that stage, that's it. But by then, you should be making a decision on where you're going, your selections, your opportunities. You should already have that relationship. And one thing I would say too is while you're in school, gain that experience with your athletic department, because some of the things that we do in professional development for our careers in football form, we want to know, we understand you want to work for the NFL, but what have you done before that? Are you working with your athletic department? Are you working with your Parks and Rec? Are you working with the YMCA Boys and Girls Club? What have you done prior to? So that's very helpful. So getting that mindset of, let me gain that experience, so when you have that conversation with us at the NFL, okay, I can call AD at Michigan. I can call, Julie and Maurice over at the student athlete development at University of Michigan, because I understand this student athlete is going to be involved. They're involved in SAC. If they're not an officer, they're a part of it, or they represent for their team. What other kind of opportunities are you already doing on campus that can be experienced, that we say, hey, okay, they have University of Michigan ready to rock. They have Winston-Salem State ready to go. They have University of Memphis ready to go. So at the same time, what are you doing prior to that can assist to show us you're a team player, not only for your sport, but for your athletic department? So that can be a good representation or reference for you.
Perfect. Thank you. I think we have,
Looks like we have a question from LaMonica. Employers, for student athletes who may not have high GPAs but definitely have the skills you are seeking, how might they address this during the interview?
Is that a question for me specifically?
Yeah. I think
okay.
Anyone think
For
about that too?
For us, certain GPAs, I wouldn't necessarily say matter, because again, as we know, when you walk across the stage, do we really look at what your major was? At the same time, your experience can tell us, the references that we call that speaks on your behalf will pretty much tell us as far as your GPA. Your first SAT or ACT score wasn't the best, but did you become and do better? Did you learn some things that could help you do, better the next time? So GPAs, we don't really necessarily look at. When we have certain professional development events, we may have certain GPAs part of the criteria for your institution to nominate you for different things that we have. At the same time, it's not an end-all be-all.
Reagan, I see your hand raised. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I do.
Go ahead.
So I've run into the problem before where I've been asked a question, whether that's like a case one or a behavioral one, that I just haven't prepared and I don't know how to answer it. Is it like a bad thing to say you don't have an answer to a question? Like, how would you go about that if you're drawing like a blank?
Again, question for me?
Sure.
Oh, okay, gotcha. I just wanted to be sure. I definitely, like Mr. Maurice said, take a breather. It's okay not to know, but hey, have a backup line for you. I'm not sure about that, but I'm willing to go find the answer through the process. So just kind of have that, as they say, your parents say, that snapback joke, but that snapback interview session of, I'm not sure, I haven't had that experience just yet, but I would be willing to research and find the answer to it.
That's awesome.
Cragen, too, sometimes when they're asking questions that might stump you, it might not necessarily be to hear what you have to say, but hear how you reacted to that type of question. So making sure you're exuding confidence in your response and being calm and maintaining that sense of composure in your answer, and not necessarily holding on to every word that you're saying. So sometimes as well, if they're a little bit more tricky, they want to see if you freaked out a little bit and held your composure, and then see your logic if it's something that might be throwing you off.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Speak to that for a second too. I know some of the tech companies like Google, they're kind of notorious for their weird interview questions, but I've heard from the recruiters specifically, they say they're not even really looking at your answer. They're looking at less about what you say, more about how you say it, how you think. But that comes from being a student athlete a lot of times, right? You're faced with conflict all the time, and the way that you can approach adversity, way to approach uncertainty, I think sometimes falls back and is an innate skill that you can draw back to. So
yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah. I think we have another. Adam, you have a question.
Yes, I do. This is a question for Joshelle. First off, I just want to say thank you for taking the time to do this. I know it's not ideal, the situations we're in right now, but I truly appreciate you dropping some knowledge on us. You as well, Emma. Really appreciate this. So my question is, when I'm trying to develop relationships with people in careers that I'm interested in, I usually go to LinkedIn and just reach out that way, set up a phone call, and then discuss with them different things about the career. Do you have any other avenues that you would suggest? For me, like specifically, I'm interested in getting into being a director of player development. So if there's people or ways, how do I navigate that in building relationships?
Awesome. Adam, thank you for your question and thank you for being here with us. I would definitely say from a LinkedIn perspective, it's always good to connect. But again, be patient. One thing that I see with quite a few LinkedIn, especially from students, once you request to connect, the first thing you do is email me your resume. Let me ask you for your resume. At the same time, I know you want to be proactive. You're looking to obtain opportunities. At the same time, gradually build that relationship. At the same time, again, speaking to what you are looking to get into. When you mentioned player development, at the same time, there's different avenues that I want to possibly hear you say that you've done before you say, hey, I want to work at the NFL player development. Have you worked with your current team? Have you spoke with your team doctor, your athletic trainer, your head football coach, or sport coach, whatever the case may be? Because there's levels to it. So continue to build relationships. One thing for me, for my different connections in athletic administration, I was one to just randomly reach out and speak and say hello, follow up, connect with, ADs, commissioners, coaches. Hey, coach, I saw you won, this game. Congrats. So it was a gradual process. So when opportunities became available, that wasn't the first time I was reaching out. That wasn't the first time, oh, hey, I see you guys have this job posted. I'm interested, da, 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 da. At the same time, I would say, hey, happy holidays, coach. Best wishes this weekend. Go get them in the Big Ten championship. Random things. At the same time, I'm not only reaching out when I need something, when a job is open, when a internship is available. Because again, like I said, once the NFL puts out a position, that link is out, it's 5,000 real easy. So gradually create a plan, create relationships, volunteer. Lord Jesus, volunteer. That's a good thing, not only for your athletic department, but, for Michigan, for the Lions, for the Tigers, the Red Wings, all of those institutions. Hey, you mind if I come shadow? You mind if I come volunteer? Because just like that, those type of relationships get you jobs just because you've done the hard work, the labor. So don't be afraid because it's not paid or because, whatever the case may be. They're going to look for those students who are willing to hit the ground running, beat the pavement. They consistently be memorable and say, hey, let me call that kid at University of Michigan or Winston-Salem State or University of Memphis because they were memorable. So continue to gradually reach out to people who may be in positions that you desire. So when opportunities become available, you're the first in line.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions, Cody? In the chat box, anything? All right, just echoing, thank you, Giselle. Thank you, Emma, so much for joining us on this call and sharing your advice and wisdom and feedback with all of us. We greatly appreciate that. And then here's just our email addresses. Anybody on the call, feel free to send us an email or reach out if you have any questions of anything that we discussed today. If you have further questions about interviewing or anything. Do we have any questions in the picture?
People saying thanks.
Oh, okay.
Yes, ma'am. I real quick. I just want to appreciate y'all letting me join, and I appreciate all the advice and everything that y'all gave me today. Thank you.
Thanks for coming by,
Thank you,
Carson.
Carson. Thanks
Yes,
for
sir.
joining
I appreciate
us.
it. Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Thanks.
Appreciate that.
And then just a quick drop in. Next Friday, our next virtual boot camp will be on salary negotiation. So The same link, same meeting ID and password. Feel free to join in next week. We'll be running virtual boot camps every Friday, 4 p.m. Eastern, different topics every week, but feel free to tune in. Great having you all. Thanks for joining again, and I think we still have weekends, right? So enjoy your weekend.
Watch the NFL draft next week, virtual.
Yes, virtual NFL draft next week. Again, thanks Emma, thanks Giselle for joining us,
Thank
and
you.
all of you.
Thank you.
Stay
Thanks
safe,
so much.
stay healthy, and go blue.
Thank you.
Blue.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Bye. Thank you.
Julie, Cody, if you can stay on real quick.
Yes, sir.
All right, team. Thanks.
All right,
Bye,
Joe,
Joe.
too, if you. One.